So do you mean, how do you mean? So was it prevalent as in just being around me, or do you mean that I was affected by it, or that I felt it? I've never felt shame. I felt a lot of judgment, but I've never had any shame. I never grew up in an atmosphere of shame. I think that's because I am from St. Thomas. When I was growing up, it was like 28 miles. So there was no secrecy, because everyone, it's like living between here and LAX. Like there was no secrecy. Everyone knew everyone else's life. You could hear your neighbor sneeze. It was just everyone knew everyone. Everyone was almost kind of related. You know, it was just there was no way we could keep any secrets. So I just never had that atmosphere growing up. Everyone just kind of knew everything. The most judgment I felt, I think, was when Confessions first came out. You know, this is before Twitter, it was before Instagram, it was before Facebook even. So there was no social media like this. There were no picture takings. There really weren't even cell phones.
Move over a little and don't touch that body pack. With
I'm trying not to touch
No, the body pack. That,
Is that what
I think it might be, so.
Oops, I just pressed the button. Am I back? Okay.
Yeah.
So, judgment. So yeah, so I felt that most during like my first tour. It was really, I was actually shocked, but that's because I'm not from here, so I didn't understand that there was like this shroud of, I didn't know that. I had no idea that people keep secrets like that. I'm like, really? I'm just from a different place, so we just don't have the same, there are no secrets where I'm from. And I felt the most judgment then. But it only made me stronger. Like I said, I'm 7 books in, so apparently it only kept me going. But I'm a different breed. I thrive on stuff like that. Okay, wait. You were first, and then I'll go to you, and then you two. Okay, go ahead.
Was there any kind of like breakthrough or experience that you had that made you want to do what you do now?
Which is what?
Speak to women, write books, kind of empower people?
I've been speaking at universities for over 10 years, so I've always done it since Confessions. My first university was Philander Smith College in 2005. I've always wanted to share my story, and I know that sharing stories in itself is empowering. Even if the story is a terrible story, even if it doesn't end well, I just know how it inspires people because it lets someone know that they're not alone. And that's really, really important. Because a lot of us feel as if we're going through things all by ourselves. As if no one else knows what was going on, because no one's talking about it. So how are you supposed to know that you're not the only person going through something if someone else doesn't say, hey, that happened to me too. And I didn't handle it very well, but it happened. And if nothing else, you can say, don't do what I did, because I didn't do that very well. You know, but you have to be able to have that conversation.
But was there any kind of like realization or kind of like light that went off that made you think that you had to do that?
No, it's just who I am. Like I've been writing books since I was 5. So Confessions wasn't my first book. My first book was actually about kindergarten. It was like 80 pages. It was dope. And it was telling all the business. I was like, hey, Kareem said a bad word. And then it was like all the tea from kindergarten. I just always wanted to chronicle my life. A little backstory. In St. Thomas, or in the Virgin Islands, St. Thomas, St. Croix, St. John, my grandparents owned the first newspaper. My great-grandparents owned the first newspaper, and they had the only photo studio on the island. So my family has been chronicling life for years. This is for centuries, basically, coming from a family of photographers and writers. My grandfather started his autobiography before he died, and he never got a chance to finish it. So I come from a long line of writers and photographers. And so it's just, I think, in my blood to always chronicle things. I'm just a chronicler of things. So even before, I would write, you know, in my diary, and I always kept all the information, take pictures of everything. I just wanted to chronicle my life. And I think that's kind of in my blood. So I don't think there was an epiphany of anything. It was just kind of, it's who I am. It's not what I do. Does that make sense? Yeah? Thank you. Your question. Okay, great. And then your question.
Well, it was more so a comment, and I just want to say I commend you. And like everyone thinks I'm crazy because I look up to you and Amber Rose because I love how outspoken you guys are. And it's like when people are like, oh, she's a hoe, but it's like, you know, when people say that stuff, it's just, I'm against slut shaming and all those other things. And I just really commend you for your outspokenness and just always sticking to your ground, and you really inspire a lot of people. And you open a lot of eyes too. Like, you inspired me to be vocal about my experiences and to fight for what I believe in.
Good, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I really, really appreciate that. Thank you. And about, shaming, the shaming of women. I am, some call it radical feminist. I'm not into shaming really anybody. Like, this is just nuts. Women still have it so hard, and we're not allowed to govern our own bodies still. We're not allowed to do what we want with our own bodies without shame and judgment, whereas men do whatever they want all the time and nobody cares. Men will never meet on Capitol Hill somewhere deciding whether we can have abortions and how do we get the birth control pill, and is it over the counter or behind the counter? Do I need permission for the Plan B? There are people discussing our reproductive systems every day. Roe versus Wade still comes up. They still have to vote on it. They're trying to figure out whether we can have Planned Parenthood or not. Or not? Men don't have these issues. No one is sitting around discussing your penises and your balls and what you guys can do with them. No one's talking about your functions, and what you do with your bodies. And is it too much? Too much sex? Not enough sex? Can you have babies? There are men out here with children. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 children. 13, 14, 15, 20 children. And no one's outraged. And you want to slut shame a woman for having consensual sex? A grown woman. For having the same sex the same man is having at the same time. We're both having sex at the same time. Why is only one of us filthy? Maybe that's because the person we're having sex with dirtied us. Maybe what's going on is that you guys don't think highly of yourself. Maybe if you didn't think you were dogs, you wouldn't think that we got up with fleas. So maybe your issue isn't with us at all, but with yourselves. Why don't you see yourself as kings? And every woman you touch is a queen. Why is it that you don't bless her with your essence instead of shaming her and dirtying her with it? So this is why women like me, women like Amber, this is why we're important. Because you got to start looking differently at the way people tell you about yourself. You have to change the internal rhetoric so you can change the external rhetoric. You can start changing lives out here and change how people see the world. Why do these things exist in 2015? Why is this happening? So you got to tell your story. You got to be vocal. You have to live out loud. You guys, girls, we can't afford to be quiet. Did you have a question? You're good?
I did.
Yes. Then I'll go to you, okay?
Okay, so my question is you're heavily demonized in the media for your telling your story, basically. So basically, what I was thinking is I made a correlation with Kim Kardashian. She does the same thing you do pretty much. And she's praised and put on a pedestal.
She does more than I've ever done, Joe. I have a number of clothes on to save her life.
Okay, so even that, but you see she's not as deep
crazy.
While she does.
Aren't you cold? It's crazy. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
But she's not demonized. People respect her and they look at her as a role model and she's praised. So I was going to ask you how much do you think race plays a role in that?
Black sex and sexuality will always be dirty to these people. That's just the way it is. And it's important, that's why it's so important for the women to speak. It's been demonized. Our sex has always been demonized. It's always been dirty in this country because we aren't supposed to even be here. They bring you over and you're having sex not with your husband, but with some random other man who might have the genes they want so they can build a super slave so they can do more work. Your sex has always been business. Never for pleasure, not for love. It continues now. Even with women who only want, well, he ain't got no money, I don't know. He could be a wonderful man. Did you point to your girlfriend? No, he could be a wonderful man. You don't put a price on a black man's head.
Yeah.
Because what you're doing is, you're doing the same thing the master is doing. only worth a certain, if he's worth the money that's in his bank account. Just like he would say, well, this man isn't worth enough money, I don't want it. That sounds like massa. You have to change your thinking. You have to change it. But yeah, so did I answer your question? I'm sorry, I got off on a tangent, y'all. Your question over there, yes. Excuse me? I don't believe that, even though we may make sweeping generalizations just to make a point, I don't believe that anyone fits into any category all the time. I think that some people start out one way and grow into another way. I think some people start out perfectly fine and stay that way. I think some people ain't worth shit and stay that way. Everyone is different. Yes. Every single one is different. Just like all women are in a certain way. Just like all women aren't hoes or the new word and y'all just make up words. It's not even a word. Like, knock it off. And also on this point, and then you know what? This is a great question, because I'm gonna make this point in reference to your question. Go to your Webster's dictionary and look up any word. Concubine, whore, strumpet. It begins with a woman who. Look up those definitions. It begins with a woman who. Such and such and yada yada yada. It doesn't say a man or a woman, or even a person. The definition of a whore is always a woman who. Strumpet, a woman who. Concubine, a woman who. A woman who. Not even person. So all whores are only to be women? So all men are like that, and all women ain't like this. And that's what the issue is that you guys want to fight for your individuality, but you want to lump all of us into categories. Really just because we deal with y'all. I'm generalizing. Okay? But that's what these categories are based off of, is our relationships with you people, you men. You categorize us, usually negatively, based on our interactions with you. Think about what this means, and I'm going to exclude you from the group because you're obviously not like that, right? That's what you're talking about? Thank you. No. Just got to teach my son better. Can you imagine what my son is going to be like? My son is already a feminist.
Can you say something about your latest book, Vindicated?
Okay. So Vindicated, which was published June of this year, is my final memoir. So I'm tired of writing about my life, by the way. I'm just gonna write some other stuff. But it's my most important. I wanted to discuss with the audience my long-standing relationship with domestic violence and abuse of all kinds. I think people think I tell all the stories, and I don't. I have a very big life, very full. A lot of things have happened. I can't believe it's my life. Sometimes I can't believe it's still alive. But I wanted to talk about that truth, which I hadn't done all this time. I've dabbled in it a little bit, but I hadn't told the most recent part of that.